We featured this tweet by Piers Morgan in our segment on Tuesday, which was an embedded video of Bezalel Smotrich talking about how they are providing the minimal amount of aid to Gaza that they can get away with without being charged for war crimes and cut off financially and militarily by the Western powers. And this was such a brazen mask-off speech from Smotrich that it prompted Piers Morgan to ask, how can anyone listen to what Smotrich says here and not conclude he sounds like a genocidal maniac? Israel's government has been taken over by headbangers like him, and Netanyahu is just letting them do what they want. Who will stop them? So here is Piers Morgan on his show. Wow, the script has flipped, says Earth Hippie. He seems to have changed his mind and opinions on things more times than Beyonce changes outfits during a concert. So here he is interviewing an Israeli spokesperson about their military aims in Gaza, sounding much more red-pilled than 19 months ago, that's for sure.
October the 7th, how many members of Hamas were there?
About 25,000.
Okay, so you've had
how many now?
You've had nearly 20 months, one of the most superior military force in the whole Middle East. You've had 20 months. You've rained down bombs which are 3 to 5, I think it's 5 or I can't remember the exact statistic, multiple times the tonnage of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You've rained it down on an area much smaller than those two cities combined. And yet you still haven't eliminated Hamas. You don't seem to be any nearer eliminating them because you still can't get the hostages back. At some point, you have to admit, don't you, that you cannot do this. This strategy is simply not working. All you're doing is killing more and more civilians. Where is the victory? You have failed.
You answered your own question there, my friend. You answered your own question there, which is what people have been telling you for the last year and a half. That is their strategy. That is their victory. Their victory is to purge Gaza of as many people as they can. And that does include, yes, killing as many as is necessary to drive out the remaining survivors. That has been the strategy all along. Not eliminating Hamas combatants, but driving the Palestinian people out of Gaza through a campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide. So he answers his own question there, a year and a half too late.
The most superior fighting force in the Middle East has failed to take out a ragbag collection of 25,000 terrorists.
They haven't failed to do anything that was never their intention. Their intention was to terrorize the population into leaving.
How? How have you failed so badly? You failed by letting them into Israel on October the 7th, and you failed to eliminate them now. And in fact, all the intelligence suggests that for everyone that you have killed in Hamas, they've been replaced by 5 more.
Wow. Wow. That is quite the change of tune.
It's too bad nobody told him this a year and a half ago.
Yeah, it's too bad he wasn't talking about this every night for the last 19 months. He may have come to this realization sooner. But of course, it is the withholding of aid that really prompted this, I think, which we'll get into in a minute. But here he is just basically bending the knee to Mehdi Hasan, saying, I have come around to your position. I resist no more. We are in agreement.
Mehdi, welcome back to Uncensored. Listen, you and I have talked about this war in Gaza for ever since it started, this phase of the 75-year conflict. And I have resisted going as far as you have done in your criticism of the Israeli government. I resist no more. I think we've reached common ground about what we view is happening and has been happening through this period of this blockade, which frankly is just starvation of the people there, including so many innocent young women and children. And I think that the incessant bombing and killing, and we don't know how many civilians have been killed, but it is on a daily basis. It looks like hundreds of people every day, with no apparent attempt, it seems to me, to have any real plan for how this ends or what happens when it ends, other than if you look at what Smotrich has been saying, probably the most right-wing member of a very right-wing government, he is talking in a genocidal language about kicking all the Palestinians out. So I think you and I have reached a place in the last few weeks where we are in agreement. But my question for you, Mehdi, is how does this end?
I don't know the answer to that question, Piers, and I'm glad we're in agreement. I wish we weren't. Actually, I wish I had been wrong and you were right. I wish that a year ago when I said on your show, you said, well, if it's not about the hostages, what's it about? And I said, it's about depopulating Gaza. It's about conquering Gaza. I wish I'd been wrong. But as you said, Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister in the Israeli government, said this week, we are there to conquer, cleanse, and remain. Those are his words. We are disassembling Gaza, he said. We are leaving it as piles of rubble. He says, we're doing something that no one's done in the world before. He bragged out loud, and he said, yes, the Gazans will have to leave. So,
Yep, that's right. That's right. Now, look, you know, those of us who have tortured ourselves this past year and a half by absorbing as much of the news as we can and packaging it and disseminating it for the purpose of getting the word out to as many people as possible. By us, yeah, I'm talking about Russ and myself in this context and our friends in the creator side, but I'm also talking about you in the audience. You guys who are here in the chat, you have social media presences. You know, you might not have the reach that we have, but you do the best you can with what you have to get the word out. So I'm talking about all of us as one in this sense. It is astounding to us how it could have taken a guy like Piers Morgan 19 months to come to this realization. How could you have not been tripped off to this immediately? In late October, Israel leveled a refugee camp. They killed hundreds of people, saying they were after one Hamas commander, and they couldn't even confirm that they had struck him. When a bomb landed right near a hospital, and they said that was a misdirected Hamas rocket. Remember that? Remember when they had to lie about firing on a hospital? Well, now there are no hospitals left in Gaza. What about when they laid siege to Al-Shifa Hospital? That was a major story at the time, claiming there were Hamas tunnels underneath it. And the Washington Post, not World Socialist website, the Washington Post, a paper of record, did a whole expose about how they found no evidence to substantiate the IDF's stories about tunnels, active tunnels under Al-Shifa. How could those have not triggered this kind of response in Piers Morgan? Well, that's a mystery that we'll be litigating, I think, for quite some time, and it's probably case specific depending on who you're talking about. When it comes to the withholding of aid, the withholding of food for 11 straight weeks, that is proof beyond even the other examples. I guess it was obvious to most of us what Israel's intentions were from the very beginning of this. But when you withhold food for more than 2 months straight, you are not, there is no like human shield defense that you can make there, right? Right. You are expressing in no uncertain terms a willingness to collectively punish the entire population because you know zero food aid is getting through. That, I believe, is what has caused this. And obviously the fact that people in our space and people in the audience and people on the streets and on campuses and in workplaces have been making a lot of noise about this, that gets guys like Piers Morgan closer to the point where they can say, you know what, I have come around. It took a lot longer than it should have taken, but I always go back, you know, this is why I say protest really does work. They wouldn't go as far as they have to try and dismantle and discredit the pro-Palestine protest movement if it didn't work at all. And I know we've all fallen into despair from time to time about the efficacy or lack thereof of these protest actions because it seems like it just falls on deaf ears and goes nowhere. If you watch No Other Land and you watch the co-director of the film, who's one of the villagers in the occupied West Bank, talk about he's just going to keep coming back and peacefully protesting every week, no matter what, no matter how useless it feels. You can draw a lot of inspiration from that, and you should. And we're going to talk about this more in detail, but that's what makes the events of last night at the embassy so horrible, because shit like that sets you 10 steps back, right? Engaging in nonviolent legal protest and discourse does work. it does work, and there will be justice for this. But it has to come in that way. That's how you win. What do you think Piers Morgan is going to be talking about later tonight? He's going to be talking about that's
Right.
that's
Exactly.
the horrible thing about that.
Yeah.
That's what makes it especially horrible as a political act. It's obviously a horrible act in and of itself, but that this demonstrates that, you know what, even when it's looking really horrible, you could still make an impact. Now, of course, the tweet Piers Morgan turns on Israel, of course, he goes and says Piers Morgan turns on Israeli government, not Israel. Qualified
Yeah.
a little bit. To which I replied, "Oh, I wish I had my response here. I thought I had it." I said, maybe in 19 more months you will come around on that too and finally criticize Israel. But sorry, the reason I monologued there is because I wanted you to get a chance to read your response to this, to give your take. So go ahead. So this was Russell's response to this, which I thought was very well put.
Yeah, I gotta say, my proofreader Ellen Jemerson pointed out to me that "damn" was misspelled too late for
Right.
Twitter.
Too late.
You only have like an hour
Right.
to edit it. Yeah, this is why you should not type fast. Send.
It
and
was
not
so
look
good.
at it.
Really, very few people gave you shit about it.
No, I'm amazed because you have so many grammar and spelling Nazis
Right,
in
yeah,
social
exactly.
media who live for that shit. That's how good it was. That's how much they liked it. Finally, the dam is bursting. The day when all of the genocidal Zionist pigs will have to answer for their Am Yisrael hieing through the live streamed mass slaughter of the Palestinian people is almost upon us. There will be severe consequences, economic, social, and professional. Good luck taking down all the sick shit you fuckers have been posting since 10/7. Good luck convincing anyone you didn't know what was going on, as so many Germans tried to do after the war. And to the cowardly, self-righteous, self-serving scum who knew it was wrong but stayed quiet all these months for fear of getting on the wrong side of the Zionist smear machine and losing out on a gig playing Rosencrantz and Summerstock or some shit, there's a special place in hell for you douchebags. Shut the fuck up about Donald Trump. We wouldn't have a single Donald Trump in politics if we didn't have millions of hypocrites like you making him look good by comparison. And yeah, that did well, especially for a lengthy tweet. And then the events of last night were not helpful. I wrote that, like right before that happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. All you're going to do is invite a crackdown by the state, and you're going to give them more credibility than they had. To your point about protest, yeah, people get frustrated. Notoriously, political activists burn out very often. I think it's important. Hey, I'm not. I'm skeptical of, self-indulgent ideas about self-care. At the same time, there's a balance. Like, hey, if you spend 24 hours a day obsessed with this shit, you're gonna burn out. Like, you do need to do certain things for yourself in order to be able to go the distance. Sprinters aren't needed. Marathon runners are needed. Do what you need to do to run that marathon, because yes, it does make a difference in the long run, but you have to realize being a Cassandra is the gig. Unfortunately, that's the gig. That's always going to be the gig. You're always going to be on the right side a couple of years before everybody comes around to your point of view.
Right.
They'll never give you credit. They'll never admit that they were the same people arguing vociferously with you and calling you a traitor, insane, a wastoid, a leftoid. They'll never admit that they called you those things 2 years ago. But that's the gig, man. That's the gig. Your only comfort is that you're doing the right thing and you're trying to be a good person in the world, and you're trying to help people in very bad situations very often, like the Gazan people. And take comfort in the community of other activists, find other people who are on that same journey. But yeah, man, that's the gig. What do you think, this is going to be the last time? Think this is going to be the last time? Nobody's going to listen to you as an activist, and you're going to have to sit there and watch the ship go into the iceberg for 2 years until everyone comes around and all of a sudden says what you've been saying for 2 years as if that's what they were saying all along. That's the gig, man. That's the activist gig. And in the end, you know when it pays off? When Assange gets freed.
Right.
That's when it pays off. And in the end, even though what happened last night is deeply counterproductive and it's a big setback, in the end, our efforts are going to triumph here. Maybe Piers is going to go and start talking about this. The narrative shift, I don't think can go back. If you look at most of what's being said about this on social media, most of it is not all of a sudden there was a change in the direction of the conversation. The only people who are really taking it that way are the usual suspects who took it that way yesterday afternoon too.
Well, yeah.
I'm not seeing a lot of people all of a sudden shift to being sympathetic towards Zionism.
Well,
today.
the reason for that too is because the pro-Palestine movement is very smart about not engaging in violent rhetoric or anti-Semitic rhetoric on these campuses and at these protests. That's what makes the smearing of them so Orwellian, right? Because they are generally very careful. Every high-profile pro-Palestine account I know was on Twitter last night saying how horrible this was. Like, nobody of any brains was out there trying to put any other spin on that because they know what this is and they know that hurts, and it does hurt, but generally the movement is smart enough to separate itself from that and move forward with a broad-based peaceful protest movement that includes legal actions like boycotting, which is why it's so important to protect those liberties, right? Because that's what makes a nonviolent movement possible, and it does work. It has worked. And as for getting discouraged, you have to remember politics in general, especially anti-establishment politics, is a game of failure. Just like baseball is a game of failure. The best baseball players in the world fail 7 out of 10 times they step into the batter's box, right? And politics is the same way. So mathematically, as a percentage, most times you go out there and protest and speak your mind, most times it's going to fall on deaf ears. But there's going to be those 1 or 2 or 3 times where it doesn't, and the cumulative effect of having been out there for years makes a difference when you might not expect it.
Yeah, well, you're forcing that point of view into the conversation,
right?
If only so that the Barry Weisses can smear you.
Right.
They're forced to acknowledge what you're saying. It's putting it out there. You don't say anything. That's not even part of the conversation. The Zionists have the field with their Hasbara, and they're able to define Zionism as Judaism. You have to be out there making the argument. And also remember, with somebody like Piers Morgan, this is why, as an activist, you're always going to be a Cassandra. When you get to a certain level of visibility and wealth, you can't fuck with the powerful. You can't. Or unless you really have conviction and you're willing to lose your position. Piers Morgan really went on and started dropping truth bombs at a time when those truth bombs were not politically palatable to establishment figures. He'd be gone. He'd be gone. We've seen it happen to a lot of people. And you know what? We've seen it happen to a lot of people. We've talked about Joe Rogan and other people who have kind of gone under the aegis of the Trump movement. Because look, man, you're Joe Rogan. You're very rich. It's like the mafia, man. You got to align with a family. You got to have a patron. Look, the left tried to take him out of Spotify, right? And then his politics more and more went that way. He ran there for protection. A lot of people have done that. If you're at that level of visibility, they're not going to let you stay there unless you're with one of the crews. You got to be with one of the mob families that run the criminal enterprise we call the Western world. A guy like Piers Morgan and people of his stature, they're not going to take up your spin or your perspective until it's politically safe. The way it becomes politically safe is by years of
Exactly.
you being out there and advocating in the streets until Piers Morgan feels like it's safe to say that. You don't do that, he never does that.
Exactly. Yes. Hey, thanks for watching our video. We're currently raising money to produce our documentary film on the Uhuru movement. Go to givesendgo.com/do dissidents to chip in.
Every dollar you give goes towards the project. We do not take any kind of salary on these. We mostly live on Gatorade when we're on the road, so even solid food is iffy, just enough to get by. But we do not take any pay for this. Every dollar actually goes into what we need to shoot the project. The Uhuru movement is a subject that really deserves more exposure. Everybody heard about it through the court case, and that was an important thing to elevate. But they've done incredible community work demonstrating a different way that is socialist and not dependent on the government at the same time, which a lot of people don't even realize that still exists in the tradition of the Black Panther food and education programs. And to show there is such a strong community like that with such strong leadership is really important, particularly at this historical moment.
Yeah, so we're really excited about doing the project, but we need your help. So go to givesendgo.com/do dissidents to chip in. Thanks very much for your support.
Please clap.